All right, so this is the follow-up video. What I actually meant to do for Wednesday was make server into a desktop. Now, I chose server 2012, I think the first time around, which was based on Windows 8.1. And Windows 8.1 obviously had a whole bunch of issues, which I went over in yesterday's video. But for this video, we're going to be changing server 2019 into a desktop. There's a lot of benefits to doing this, but also some drawbacks. So let's go ahead and jump into it.
This video is brought to you by CDN77, the content delivery network used by space agencies and CentOS. I also am using this on christitus.com to speed up my website, so if you're interested in this, click the link in the description.
Now, as far as the drawbacks, immediately I'm going to tell you, you lose some convenience with Server 2019. One, we have to reconfigure it to be more desktop oriented, and then two, driver support isn't what it is on Windows 10 desktop. So I'm using a very obscure board. It's an ITX board meant for really small computers, and it has like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, a lot of these things that server hardware just doesn't have. So a lot of the install is a little difficult, especially when it came to my network driver. I just want to go ahead and say most people won't run into these kinds of problems, especially if using a bigger board, but laptop users, be aware you're going to have a difficult time and you're going to need a secondary computer to hunt down these drivers if you're on a laptop. Now, bigger desktops and stuff probably will fly right through. It just depends. Mileage will vary, so you've been warned. But with that, let's go ahead, jump on the desktop, start installing Windows Server 2019, and set up the ultimate gaming rig in Windows Server. Okay, let's start this thing out. I'm going to go ahead and boot up my computer and install some Windows Server 2019, and then we'll start customizing after it. Now I'm going to jump through most of this install, so you don't have to really worry about, sitting here watching a progress bar for an hour, because I'm going to be the one doing that. So I'm going to hit F11, get to my boot menu, come over to here. We're going to try UEFI and see how that goes. Now, if you are on a legacy-only system, obviously you wouldn't want to select UEFI. I usually prefer UEFI because it's the newer technology between legacy and it, but sometimes it can have some quirky things when doing OS installation, so I fall back to legacy whenever I run into a problem. So with that, let's go ahead and hit next and start installing. So you'll have three options typically. This is you have standard, KMS. This is kind of like an all-in-one ISO I've created. Core will not give you a graphic user interface, so that's not obviously what we want, because we're going to be changing this into an actual gaming workstation, so that's not it. Standard is probably those, like if you buy like a license key directly off Amazon. KMS will go through an actual online activation thing. This is actually meant for big business, like let's say you run an activation server in a large corporate environment, you could go through this. So select whichever one's right for you. And I'm just going to go through these and delete all the extra partitions. I want it to go on the solid state drive, so I'm going to just clear up some of these old partitions. All right, and this setup is pretty much exactly like regular Windows when it comes to server. Not too much to be said here, so I'm going to go ahead and speed through all of this to the end, because this can take anywhere between 5 to 30 minutes usually on an average system. All right, let's see what happens here on reboot. That was awfully fast. It was about a 3-minute install using USB 3. Let's see what pops up here. Typically on server, on the initial install, you'll see a couple reboots afterwards. This is pretty normal. Now, the problem with server in comparison to regular Windows 10, I should say, as it's getting ready, is the updates. When I go to update this thing, it's probably going to take a long while, because Windows Server updates typically are a lot bigger than client. So I usually give about an hour for the updates. Usually the update process is what takes the longest. And in business, what happens is I usually have a master ISO that I slipstream all the updates in, so it doesn't take as long after the initial go. All right, let's change our settings and get going here. This is the initial start, so we'll see if I can do that. I usually can't do weak passwords, which you shouldn't be doing anyways, but all right, so do Control Delete to log in. Now we'll disable a lot of these security profiles that server has by default, like Control Delete. It typically has something called Shutdown Tracker. That means when you go to shut down your PC, it says, hey, why are you shutting down this PC? Those types of things can be disabled. We're going to go ahead and go through that real fast to do the initial setup on our Windows server. Now you'll see that Server Manager pops up for the first time. I'll usually use this just to set up, and then we'll modify so it will actually be hidden on subsequent startup. So let's go ahead and configure our local server. And from here, let's go ahead, change the name of the PC. We're gonna call this Studio PC. Okay, close, we'll restart later. So now we can go here, say allow, and apply. So there's that. NIC teaming is good if you have more than one network card. You can actually bond them together. You can't do this in standard Windows 10, but you can in Windows Server 2009. Fun fact, some of the early versions of Windows 10, they actually left NIC teaming in so we could actually bond network connections together. But I believe they took that out in 1703 and onward. So it's been several years now before that was capable. All right, feedback and diagnostics. We'll go into settings here. And we'll put this to basic. So we don't want to be sending stuff back. And we'll just say never for feedback frequency. Close that out. That's actually kind of a new thing in Server 2019. I don't like feedback or diagnostics, but whatever. IE enhanced security, you want this off. On server, it makes it to where you can't really even properly browse the web. And they do this on purpose because you shouldn't be browsing the web on an actual production server. We'll change our time zone. All right, we've changed our time zone. Internet time, let's change these settings. I always switch it from time.windows to time.nist.gov. It's just far more reliable than Windows time. And we haven't activated yet, but that's okay. We'll do that here in a bit. All right, so this is pretty much done. In older versions of server, you actually had the desktop experience, such as like Server 2012, I believe this was the case, and prior, which is technically what I still use a lot in production. 2016 is what I'm kind of moving everything to. I like to run about a revision behind in business, but for us, 2019 is what we're using, which is the latest and greatest. And we're going to change where Server Manager pops up. So we don't want it refreshing in the background, and we don't want to start it automatically on login. So we won't see this screen again unless we launch it directly. So we'll close out of this. Next up, we need to start customizing the install. Before we do that, though, you'll notice that the audio service is not running. So let's see what's up with that. And we'll go into our desktop or device manager and see what we have. So as you can see, we're missing a lot of stuff. Specifically the internet or the Ethernet controller. So let's go ahead and install the Ethernet controller among with these other devices as well. Okay, so now I went ahead and put all of the drivers on my USB drive. I downloaded them directly from my motherboard's website. However, you don't have to. You could pretty much just get the network driver and then just have Windows download it. However, I think it's just a little cleaner, so that's why I'm doing this method. So I'm going to do an all-in-one AMD setup because this is AMD 2700, which is a really nice CPU. I got a stellar deal of like 180, 8 cores, 16 threads. So by very much, this is a budget computer, but it's extremely high performance. So it should be for an awesome gaming rig. All right, we got our AMD installed. We'll go back. Install our audio. We'll just go through this. This is a Realtek. Sometimes on these audio installs, they have like a client. Sometimes server just doesn't like running those, which is fine. As long as the driver gets installed, you're fine. We'll say no to restart later. We're almost there. Now we get our actual network connection, our network device connection. So it wants to close the MMC, which is fine. And as you see, our audio device is already picked up without the reboot, but we'll still reboot anyways after a fresh driver install. That's always wise. All right, it says could not install drivers. We'll reboot afterwards, see what it does anyhow. If it does run into problems, we can manually install the driver. It's probably just something directly with Windows 10. Whenever you use a residential board on server, you can get some quirkiness like this. And we'll go ahead and install the wireless driver because there's already a wireless driver in here. I like to make sure everything with Device Manager is cleared up prior to going forward with an install, because if you don't, you can run into a lot of issues later on, or just have your operating system not function at its peak level. All right, we'll finish this and give it a reboot and see what we get. And actually, before we reboot, let's just escape this. I want to change some of the settings using group policy, because some of these server settings are just a pain, and I just don't like them. So let's look at the full screen here, and we're going to go into administrative system, and I believe in system, there's some spots in here we can change. First, display shutdown event tracker. That's what we just saw. We're going to hit disabled for this, so it won't display that. Other things, I believe in Windows settings, security settings, local policy, security options, there should be do not require Control-Alt-Delete. We're going to hit enabled for this one. That makes it so we can just hit a space key and then go ahead and sign in. All right, we're going back into Device Manager. We still have a bunch of unknown devices. The Ethernet controller did not get installed, which is unfortunate, but have no fear. We still have some other tricks up our sleeve. Now, for this, I'm going to try and use an all-in-one utility called 3DP ChipNet. This is like a bundle of network drivers. I think it's probably the easiest for the person at home. However, if this was a business, I don't like using third-party utilities like this on a server, so I would probably go through and find the device and hardware ID and manually grab the driver for server 2019. But that's not today, so I think we'll be fine with just this. Now, I will try one more manual update, just browsing and actually listing the connection. So let's go into here, drivers, and we're going to see if we can't manually install it through here. All right, so I went ahead and downloaded 3DP ChipNet driver. This is a bundle driver, and see if this can't get around the Ethernet issue. So here it is. It'll extract to C3DP, and we should be able to go ahead and do this. All right, so we're go ahead. It went ahead and launched. I'm going to close out of my USB drive, and we'll see if this can fix our driver issue. It says it's ready for use. I hit finish. However, I did not see any bit of this actually update the driver in the background. So I might manually force this through. So I'm having problems with this. So if the bundle driver fails, the actual driver you download from the manufacturer fails, you're going to manually have to find the driver, which can be a bit of a pain. So I'm going to show you that real fast. Details, hardware IDs, and you'll see the vendor and the device number. The rest of this don't have to pay attention to. So with the vendor and device ID, I'm going to pull up Google on my other screen, track down. I know 8086 for a vendor is Intel. The device 1539A is an actual network interface card. So with that, we'll see the exact card. And what I like to do is try and either get the driver directly from Intel instead of the motherboard, or if that fails as well, you can pick the next nearest card. Sometimes residential cards aren't supported in commercial, but they use the same chipset of a nearby card. So let's see what we can find. So I identified this card as an Intel i211 gigabit card. So let's see if we can manually pick this out and see what we get. Now, mind you, this is like a last resort. I don't recommend manually picking your driver out if you can help it. But again, server works a little bit differently, and I'm kind of glad we're doing a little driver hunt here just to kind of showcase some of the old school functionality of Windows that still kind of exists when you just can't find a driver. And this is not so much against Windows as any operating system out there. When you have incompatible hardware or hardware that's really obscure, you kind of have to hunt and do some things to fix it up to where it works on that OS. So using just what's in the actual thing, we're going to go down to Intel and see what we can find for the actual driver. So this one's pretty close. It's an i210, which should do it, but I'm going to check to see if we have anything else. I like this one a little bit better. It's an i210 as well. Still no i211 though. So I did not find an exact match, but very close. Just one digit off. A lot of times this won't work, but let's go ahead and give it a whirl. Looks like it brought it up. And look at that. We do have a network connection using the i210. This is an i211 card, but it does look like the chipsets are the same. Just the server version of this card is a little bit different. It's kind of weird that I couldn't find that exact one. Now, we'll do a full update here. I'm going to go ahead and cut the clip because this update's probably going to be around an hour as it's downloading all the security updates, any missing drivers, those types of things. It's going to install all this stuff, so I anticipate this taking probably about an hour. Okay, so after a couple restarts here, I figured out that we are all up to date. It took 2-3 restarts, about 30 minutes or so. Not too bad. That was a pretty up-to-date ISO I already had. Please note, most people, it probably will take upwards of an hour and a half to 2 hours to really update their Windows server, especially if you have an older disk that came with the system or the license that you acquired. Just know that this is probably the longest period of time when setting up server. Now, we still have a couple things in our device manager that is unrecognized. Looking at this, it looks like I don't have my RX 580 in here. I don't like Internet Explorer. We're going to change this up. So we're going to install some utilities using ninite.com, and we'll go ahead and put Chrome, Steam, and Discord. Notepad++ is great for editing text files. And then I like to do WinSCP and PuTTY just for connecting to other computers. 7-zip's great for the extract here function. VLC for playing movies. And the rest of this, I'm going to go ahead and leave as is. I don't think I need anything else out of here. We'll go ahead and grab this package. And this will just kind of set up all these programs for me on here. So let's take a peek here and see how this goes. Okay, so we have all those programs installed. As you saw, it only took a minute or two. Ninite's a good way to get a jump start on a new system, whether it's Windows 10 or Windows Server. Ninite's a great tool because it just flies through all that. So let's download our AMD drivers. And we're at the 500 series. I got an RX 580. And as you see, we don't actually get an install on Windows Server because a 580 is a residential card. But I believe we can still use the Windows 10 package. Let's see how this works. All right, with our package downloaded, we'll launch into that. We'll hit install. Let's see if it finds any of our drivers. I'm hoping this works, even though this is technically the Windows 10 installer. We're going to do a custom install here. Now, the device that's installed on here right now for AMD, this is mainly just the CPU, so the numbers won't be actually matched up at all. Now, it says cannot properly identify graphics hardware. This is probably because of Windows 10, but this is actually okay, because I believe it extracted a lot of those devices into our C drive. So let's take a look here, and we'll see under the packages section, the drivers are actually in audio and display. We should be able to install these packages. Let's see if we can do a direct install from here. So we'll go into our INF folder. These ones right here, the security catalogs, we want to install, or actually, I'm sorry, the setup information. You can actually go ahead and hit install here, and it'll install this specific packages directly into Windows. Now, the cool thing about this is the packages become available to Windows. Therefore, it should technically see it when we do a search for drivers. Now, whether or not that works, I don't know. Now, I did see the screen flicker there, which is typically a good thing. Okay. Setting systems change. That's a good thing. So we're going to scroll down and see if we can find any more setup information. There isn't any here, which is good. Now, remember, there was also drivers for the audio as well. So we'll go through each one of these and install all of them directly into the system as well using that setup information. So setup information right here. We'll go ahead, and I believe this is an INF file is the actual proper one. We'll go ahead and install that. Come back one more, HDA bus. Do the same thing. Just right click, install. Little tedious, but it's worth it to get all those. Like I said, you want to get proper performance out of your games, and technically, since we don't have like that AMD software running in the background, this is actually a pretty lean setup. As tedious as this is, I don't mind it, because at the end of the day, less bloat equals a faster computer. And as you see, it did find something there. We'll go ahead and install it. Now, some of these drivers obviously aren't needed, but just by right-clicking the setup information, hitting install, puts them directly into Windows, its catalog. So when it goes to search for drivers on your computer, it just looks through its local catalog first and goes, oh, well, never mind, it's here, and then just grabs the one it needs. As you saw by manually doing it, it wasn't any good. So let's see what our device manager looks like now. Now we got the RX50. The weird thing is our other devices aren't actually in here. Let's do a manual query and see if it finds anything. It did not. So we still have some hunting to do. I'm not going to do any more driver hunting on this video, but just know you'd want to go through each one of these, go into properties, driver, details, and then go to hardware IDs, and then find each one of these specific drivers and install them just to make sure you have everything installed properly on your system. Hunting down drivers isn't fun, but at the same time, I believe it's a necessity. So I've got almost all my devices, hunted them down, got everything installed the way it should be, cleaned up my desktop, put it into what I call old man mode, which ups the DPI, which makes everything a little bit clearer. I like it for recording, and also my monitor's probably about 2-3 feet away from me, so I actually like it just to view as well. So as you see, there's a couple devices here, the unknown devices. This is actually my Wi-Fi card. Now, I tried various methods to get this installed, but I think it uses third-party software along with it, and there was no way to really hack around and get this going without spending a lot more time on it. So I have obviously a LAN connection, so there's no point in having the Wi-Fi, so I'm going to just disable these devices because I don't need them. Other note is like Bluetooth and other things can be a little tricky to install. I did get those Bluetooth drivers installed because you just never know. I might actually want to connect a Bluetooth device to this computer. But for now, I'm disabling these two that are related to just my Wi-Fi card, which I don't need for this computer. Now, other things we need to do is go into services. Now, you'll notice down in the bottom right here, we have no audio service, which is no good. We already installed the audio driver. We saw it was working, but it just didn't work. Well, Windows Server by default doesn't have any audio, and it disables that service. So if you go down to Windows Audio, you actually want to set this to automatic. We'll hit apply and start. This should give us audio. So there is that, and we actually are on speakers, and there we go, the little ding. Perfect. So this gives us audio, and it should start up properly each time after you reboot your computer. So we are now at a functional desktop. I'm going to go ahead and end this part here. We still need to do some stuff. I've already installed Steam and other things, but I actually want to get into gameplay and see if we run into any problems with a whole variety of different software. Maybe even pop up the Windows Store a little bit and try to install some applications through it and test out all the different options we have on Windows Server. Alright, so that was Windows Server 19 initial setup. I'm going to get to some gameplay and other configurations in tomorrow's video. I just wanted to go ahead and make this one just so you can kind of see it, because I've seen some YouTube videos that go, oh, here's my Windows Server gameplay, and I'm just like, well, how'd you get to that? That's the whole purpose of today's video, is the setup and configuration, and why I made this kind of like a part 1 and part 2 series, just because this is a bit long in the tooth as far as making the video. I was a little surprised on Windows Server on how long it took me to get and find these drivers, but at the end of the day, it's well worth it. One thing I had noted here is now that I've installed my graphics drivers, they're not going to auto-update. There's no GeForce Experience or AMD running in the background that says, hey, you got a new driver, update. a lot of those annoyances just kind of go away. But how's the gameplay? Well, we're going to see that in the next video, so stay tuned for that. And let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. I'm really curious to see how this turns out in the long term. Actually keeping this as a gaming PC, I don't know. We'll see. But a big shout out to all my patrons. Without you, I couldn't make videos like this one. And I'll see you in the next one.